second episode of Mastering the Game Inside Coaching Minds. I'm Dr. Jeremy Bruick, and in this episode, we're going to look into the coaching philosophy of Coach Mike Fuline, our head men's basketball coach here at the University of Mount Union. Let's get right into his coaching insights with our guest. Welcome back, Coach.
Oh, thanks for having me.
Awesome, man. Well, we do appreciate you, and we want to talk today about personality a little bit. So, how do you kind of perceive the influence of personality traits on your athlete's performance? And can you share with us just some specific instances where you really needed to know a person's personality before you could improve them from a coaching standpoint?
Well, I think it first starts in the recruiting process, right? So, as we're trying to look at different players, and you're evaluating, obviously, the talent of a player, but you are definitely looking at some of the personality traits. Do they have the traits that fit maybe the things that we believe in? Everybody wants, as a coach, a great person and a team guy and all that, but it's not a perfect world. So I think the major thing you look for is when adversity hits, especially in recruiting, how that player responds. And quite honestly, times has changed so much, maybe how families respond too, because there's a lot of dealing with families. So that's an asset for a college coach, because we get to kind of pick and choose and make those determinations. In high school and in middle school, obviously you have the players who you're trying to develop those traits as young people into, obviously, at the high school level. So the thing that's helped us a lot, we recruit very competitive guys. So, we want to have really good players, respectful people, but the trait that we're looking for when it comes to a personality trait is just competitiveness. So we base our practices on that. Everything we do, I've learned a long time ago that if you have players and athletes who are competitive, then we need to, as coaches, make that even more of a positive thing when planning a practice. So our practices are based on winning and losing every drill, right? And the punishment, so to speak, is 10 push-ups, or if the guy's got a bad wrist, or 10 jumping jacks, whatever it is. But you would think that you're playing for a trophy. Those great teams have those traits that, in practice, right? There's a winner and loser, and that's a huge part, and it's a huge part of evaluating people, of evaluating not only us personally as a program, but then you have to self-evaluate, is your practices set up to help that competitiveness, those certain traits. So that's been a very good thing for us.
Yeah, great. And good point on the competitiveness. We're always looking to have individuals on our teams that are competitive, and we know that we're balancing a lot of individual personalities on those teams, right, even if they are all competitive, right? So how do you balance catering to an individual athlete's needs based on their unique characteristics while you're trying to get this cohesive team dynamic going around?
Right. Well, I think the chapter explains too, when you utilize the psychodynamic approach, it allows you to address individual players' concerns, while the trait approach helps in recognizing strengths and weaknesses. So, again, there are some players who I've coached that they are better if I am, right, and constantly in their ear. You can get on them a little bit more. Nobody likes to be that guy, but some players are just better accustomed to that. And then there's some of the best players that I've coached that I have to whisper it to, right? Hey, bud, come on, let's try a little bit harder. So, because if I don't do that, then I can lose them. They're not used to that reaction. We recruited a player, and we watched him all through his senior year of high school. And his head coach was a great head coach, but man, he would just berate this young guy, and almost to tears after games talking to him. So I knew when he came here that's what he was accustomed to, and trying to break that and get that trust and that feel. It was a weakness on my end if I treated him like that. So understanding those things with individual guys is a unique process. Now, having said that, there are certain standards unacceptables, we call them, that every player must have. I don't care what trait that you have, right?
Right.
But having an approach to individual people is coaching, man. Like, you have to be able to understand what your athlete's going through. We've coached players, and I'm sure many of the students have as well, or been around players on teams that, they're going through a tough time in life. And then being able to understand that as a coach and as a staff, and embrace that, and instead of being the enemy, right? We're here to help you out. So there's a lot of different approaches, and that we've read about. But the number one thing is knowing your players, and what kind of triggers them. And again, that may take a little while to learn that, and maybe over a year or 2 years. But it's a very effective, response when you have the right method to each individual athlete.
Yeah, that humanistic approach is so important, and I like how you connected it back to what we were reading this week in the textbook. And the book also discusses this 5-factor model that includes dimensions like neuroticism and conscientiousness. In your coaching practice, how do you consider these types of traits when you are working with your athletes? And do you see any correlation between people that are highly conscious and their performance, for example, or what insights do you have there?
Well, we have coached many guys. Neuroticism is real, right? And being very conscious. We have players who, I think we even talked about last week, they have to have, the certain amount of shots in. They have to eat this, prior to a game. So what we try to do is, when we have individual workouts, like, they make their time. A lot of those players like to get in at the very beginning of the morning, 6 a.m. or 7 a.m. We're there alone. It's still kind of dark outside. So you just try to appease their process, right? And but it's very real. I think as coaches, what we can do to help them is just, even as a coach, I have to remind myself, you have to control the controllables, right? What can I control? What is out of my realm? I can't worry about things that aren't even happening or could happen. And trying to understand that, and it helps me when I'm having those talks with the player, because maybe sometimes I get some negative thinking too. But we've had players who, to get them on a plane to go travel is difficult. For them to be on an elevator is, so It's been a unique experience, but understanding what those levels are, embracing them, trying to have them grow. The one player who refused to get on a plane as a junior and got a ride to Florida, then as a senior, we got him on the plane, right? And now, to me, that's a life lesson. If he wants to go travel, he did it. He didn't enjoy it, but he did it, right? So, you're dealing with so many different personalities and the traits, but, when you're talking about a humanistic theory or approach, that's what coach. If you can't have that, then you're going to struggle as a coach. If you can't, be open to different, personalities and approach people differently, then it's going to be you may need to find something else to do, because you're going to get so many different personalities that will remind you, maybe if you coach long enough, of different players, but you better be able to adapt, to all kinds of different needs.
Right. Yeah. So when you think about not just the traits that athletes are bringing to you, but if we think a little bit about the cognitive processes, their own thoughts, their own skilled levels, the time and effort that they're investing, what do you think are successful interventions that or improvements that you could bring to those players when we're looking at all those individuals? It's not just one person that you're looking at with all those things, it's a whole team. So are there interventions that you use or that you have used that have been successful if you got to break through with that one athlete?
Sure, and throughout the years, absolutely, we've had, but ultimately, as a professor, this, you can only get them so far. Then, as grown men and women, and especially in college, they have to take that extra step, right? They have to take that step to want to get better at that. You can keep saying it's okay. You got to have fun, relax.
Yep.
I can't tell you how many times I've looked at a player in their eyes, like, it's just basketball, man. Like, it's gonna be okay,
Yeah.
right? Like, no one really is gonna care in the month of April or May, what just happened. So, just that constant reminder of putting things in perspective.
Yeah.
Like, we have to be able to, put things in perspective so they don't, especially somebody who has some high anxiety, or just so self-conscious of their performance. And we talked about it last week too, and I'll probably continue this throughout, that just film, right, showing them positive things, and just to kind of trigger some of those positive moments. My son, as a senior football player, every week I'd make him a little highlight film for 2.5 minutes with music. It probably wasn't very well done, but just for him to understand, hey, we're with you, man. This is some positive things that happen. This is who you are, and just keep trying to drive that home so the confidence level goes up and they can stop thinking. Like, the best players in the world work so hard that it's just a reaction. It's just a reaction, and those are fun players to coach.
Yeah. Those are probably those times when you hear a coach say after the game, that was something special, right?
Right.
They've eliminated the cognitive part, and they're just doing what they know how to do so well. So,
Right.
yeah, I can imagine that as a coach, you're dealing with those personalities, and you're also navigating influence of, let's say, things like the environment on your athletes' behavior. So,
Sure.
how does environment impact your athletes, and from what perspective do you approach it when you see an athlete's being kind of influenced by their environment, and whether it's positive or negative, I guess?
The environment is kind of everything. So you want that environment to be an open one. So we have players who like to speak out, right, and are very vocal at times. And then others, you may not hear 10 total words from them in a week. And that's okay. Everybody's going to lead and approach things their own way. But I do know this, that many of the athletes we've coached, and you will coach, is that they're going to want positive reinforcement, right? They're going to want people to acknowledge them. And again, I think we had spoke about this last week. Like, you praise in public and criticize in private. I mean, that's always kind of been a saying that I've learned at a young age. And I think, the environment that, now practice could be different, right? There may be times in practice where you can get on a guy a little bit harder. But in a game, especially at a basketball gymnasium, like, everyone's watching, right? I mean, there's eyes everywhere, and you're so close to the floor. And probably the same as in volleyball. Football, you can get away with it. Maybe track and field, you get away with it. Soccer, those types of things. But because it's a little further away, and you can have those conversations. But man, when you're in intimate situations and that environment's small, and you're trying to get on my case, and people can see that, and you're embarrassing me, probably not the right way to go, especially at the high school level. And certainly not even in college. I mean, it's not fair to those people. And a lot of times what happens, Jeremy, is, if I have a disagreement with a player, and that player's like, Coach, no, and I go back and watch film, there's a large percentage of the time they were right, and I was wrong. So it's important, especially even after a game, before you go yell and scream, you better evaluate that first.
Yeah, I think that's just a great point for life in general. The reflective practice that you have as a professional is really important, and it's important that you give yourself time to reflect before you make a decision that could be negative towards a person, whether it's an athlete or a fan or anything. So that reflective practice is something that we're always trying to get young people to adopt, and it's important for coaches too. So,
right. And I think on that, after you reflect, you have to be, especially as a leader of a group or a leader of a class or whatever that may be, you have to be able to say, oh, I screwed that one up. Like, I tell our team all the time, man, that was a bad one on my part. Pick me up, help me out here, So being able to hold yourself accountable, it not only models what you're asking for from your players, it also brings in a togetherness that, hey, he knows when he screwed up, and you just own it, and then you move on to the next thing.
Yep, coming right back to that humanistic approach that we talked about in this chapter.
Right.
So I'm going to wind it down with just one final one. We do talk in this chapter a little bit about personality assessment methods, and some of those include standardized inventories, and there's different types of observations and measurements that are out there. But have you found anything like that that's effective for you in trying to understand your athletes, or is that something that you dole out to an assistant coach, or where are you with kind of more of standardized personality assessments in your role?
Yeah, listen, we've tried everything, right? In all the years, I mean, we try, whatever you can, and I think, an assessment after a season, an assessment with your seniors as they're leaving, is sort of like a standardized type of observation and inventory of some of the positive things and some of the things that they would change, and those are hard to hear at times, right? Yeah. So, we haven't really done any personality standardized tests to see, where you can pretty much pick up on that as the season goes on, especially in workouts. And, we've been wrong. I just got done talking to our assistant coach, we need to do a better job of, while recruiting, instead of just the families and meeting with the families and the coach, is there a way we can talk to a teacher or a principal? And my assistant today he's going to go watch a player, and he has an appointment with the principal afterward. Just to get honest evaluation, because if we know heading into the recruitment process in the season, hey, this one's going to be a little tough. Are we willing to take that chance, or this is how you have to coach this individual person? And we like challenges, and especially if they're really good, right? It helps in determining that. But you're always assessing. Now, whether that's a test, as the chapter talked about, or just, again, watching the behavioral approach, how they approach different things. And again, you think but as a coach, man, everyone's really, really good in the off season or when things are going well. When you truly know is when things are haywire, and who kind of comes together and who kind of helps navigate through those tough times. And those are your true leaders, and we as professors and coaches have to help develop that skill, right? And call it out. I'm kind of a smart aleck at times. Oh, things are going bad. Oh, watch it. Everyone who wants to jump ship, who's soft, type of deals. And you just kind of challenge them. And what happens is your leaders then kind of get refocused and then kind of go back to leading.
Yeah. So as we're kind of wrapping up here, personality is just a really complex situation, and you got to deal with it on a person-by-person basis, obviously. I just wanted to thank you again for your time, Coach. Thanks for sharing your knowledge and your experience. We certainly appreciate that, and we look forward to a couple more episodes of Mastering the Game. Until next time, Dr. Jeremy Burke signing off, and thank you, Coach.
Thank you.